Good evening and welcome to tonight's Yukon City Council, Yukon Municipal Authority work session. It's January the 2nd, 2024. Can you believe that? 6:30 p.m. We're in the council chambers, which is here in the Centennial Building at 12 South 5th Street in the great city of Yukon, Oklahoma. And so tonight, our discussion is going to be about the Garth Brooks traffic corridor and Joe Davis with Team Design.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. My name is Joe Davis with Team Design. Tonight we are going to go over the Garth Brooks corridor. We're going to talk about the history on the corridor. We've had a long history with this corridor going all the way back. If we want to go ahead and get started at the first slide.
Is it turned on?
Yes, it is. There we go. Goes all the way back to 2016 when the first traffic study was done on the corridor. And back in 2016, there was 24,800 vehicles per day. And everybody goes, well, that seems like an awful lot of cars. What does that really mean? So we look at operations through highways, through city streets, and through intersections, and we give them a level of service A through F, including E. So if we have, for this type of corridor, which is a 4-lane corridor, if there's 22,000 cars in a corridor similar to this, it would be a level of service of C. So in 2016, we already exceeded that level of service of C. So you can already see we're already in a bad mode. We're starting to deteriorate, and if anything, we've seen since 2016, traffic has gone up in the corridor. When the study was done, they went ahead and looked at a 3% annual increase, which is somewhat similar. We see a range anywhere from usually about a 2.1% to about 3% here in Oklahoma for increase in traffic. But for the traffic study, they are using a more moderate conservative 3%. The study went ahead and identified 13 major improvements to be done in the corridor. And the improvements really ranged from two different types of improvements. One was an operational. An operational can go ahead and be, back in 2016, if you pull up to the left turn, we did not have a flashing on yellow. So once when it went ahead and turned through its green cycle, you had to wait for the next cycle. You could not have that yield on left flashing. Or it could be to improve the interconnections of the controllers. In this 1 mile that we're really going to focus on tonight from Vandermont down to 10th Street, we have 8 signals in that 1 mile. So it's really important if these signals are talking to each other to try to get everybody through as fast as possible so we don't have an awful lot of delay time at each of the signals. The second item that we look at after operational is actually capital expenditure. What can we do to go ahead and improve physically this section of road? Can we go ahead and add a 5th lane? Can we go ahead and add dual left turns? Can we add a dedicated right turn? What can we do to get more cars through this corridor? So that's the second thing that we looked at. And again, they went ahead and identified 13 major issues. There we go. So you've probably seen this map a little bit. We've done a little bit of tweaking on here. And we're going to go ahead and take this all the way up to Main Street to show a 2-mile stretch. The study, again, focused on that 1-mile stretch, but we wanted to go ahead and show what's happening in the entire corridor. So if we start at Main Street and we start heading down south, one of the things that your staff was able to go ahead and work on and identify was a CRISA grant that's going to be done on Garth Brooks between Main Street and Vandermont. And again, that's going to be a mill and inlay. It's an asphalt surface through there, and if you start looking at the asphalt throughout this entire corridor, it's starting to get aged. It's starting to oxidize. You're starting to see cracks in it. So this will go ahead and mill out the surface course, put down fresh new asphalt, and then restripe it. And again, that's a CRISA grant, part of the ARPA funds that were coming out that the city was able successfully to go ahead and get. Next project I'm going to go ahead and talk about, which is another grant project, which was the TAP grant that your staff worked closely with ODOT trying to secure those funds. And that's basically doing a new sidewalk trail from one end of the interchange to the other end of the interchange. So it's basically going just short of Health Center Parkway and going right through the ramp. There's no sidewalks there right now. The difficulty with that stretch, I think we've talked about this in the past, is that the bridge concrete walls from the abutments are so steep, there's really no room to get any sidewalk in. So we have to excavate that, put in some retaining walls to go ahead and get that in. And again, your staff did a fantastic job working with ODOT to get awarded a TAP grant. Those are very rare for a municipality to get, so it's fantastic that Yukon was able to get one of those. And again, that was almost $1 million for that grant right there for that project. We start looking at more of the projects, and again, it's some of the projects we've been talking about for a long time. It's doing the improvements on 10th Street. And as we work our way north, we were talking about that 5th lane, trying to get some additional capacity, improvements on all the signals going through there. Once when we get to the interstate ramps, we start recognizing that if you're going southbound in the morning and you're trying to get towards Oklahoma City, traffic backs up there. So we're talking about putting in dual left turns at that southbound to eastbound connection to the interstate. When we do that, we have to go ahead and add width to the ramp getting onto the interstate, because we're going to have 2 lanes on that ramp. They're going to go ahead and taper down to 1 lane. We keep on going through the interchange, and we have the same problems with our PM traffic coming off the interstate. So the westbound off, when they're making that southbound movement, the traffic backs up there. So we're doing dual left turns. And again, all these issues that we're talking were identified in 2016. So again, we've recognized the need for the improvements here. And then as we go ahead and go past the interchange and keep on going north, we're talking about adding the 5th lane through there all the way up to Vanderbilt. And again, there's individual things that are happening to each of the signals too. And we've gone ahead and identified it. And again, if you all want to, we can go into further detail on each one of these improvements. But again, this has been kind of our roadmap on what we're looking at for the corridor. So the next question comes, we've had the study since 2016. What's changed? Has the city implemented any of the changes that were identified in the 2016 study? And there has been quite a few things that have been completed. And we have to recognize the things that were done, some of them were more on the operational and some of them were on the capital side too. So we talked about on the operational side doing that conversion for the left turns to go ahead and have flashing yellows so you can go ahead and still make that left turn. The other thing we talked about was trying to get the controllers to communicate. So in, I believe, 2020, there was improvements done to all the controllers so they could go ahead and talk. When controllers talk, they have a signal that goes ahead and interconnects each one. So the goal is a platoon of cars can go all the way through the corridor without continually hitting a red light once when they get started. That's the goal. Issues come up with operations, and we're getting ready to talk about operations a little bit later in the presentation. But just to kind of give you an idea, you can recognize that computers have their own memory clock going inside. They have their own timer going on inside. And if they get off by a millisecond, it impacts every single signal. Or if there is a push button on a pedestrian ped, gets stuck, it impacts every one of the signals, those 8 signals that we're talking about in this corridor. So while there is, a possibility for this to really work well, there's also a possibility for things to happen in the corridor. It's technology, as we like to say. Sometimes it's cursed and sometimes it's fantastic. Health Center Parkway, we went ahead and added the east and west left turn lanes for Health Center Parkway. And then there's 2 projects that weren't identified in the study, but we recognized needed to be done. And those were the northbound dedicated right turn, and then the southbound dedicated, and again, these are the ones on the I-40 westbound on-ramp. So if you're going if you're going northbound, it goes ahead and gives you that dedicated turn onto the ramp. And if you're going southbound, where the Brahms is, it went ahead and added the lane there so you can make that dedicated right turn. So those were 2 additional projects that have been done on the corridor. So when we talked a little bit about just the mass number of signals, again, usually when we try to see design, current design, you try to minimize the number of signals and you try to have the circulation occurring within the development. 20 years ago, it's just the opposite. The idea was every commercial person who was coming in wanted to have their own traffic signal because they wanted the traffic to come into their stores. So we have a plethora of signals that occur in this small corridor. That makes it even more important for us to have an operational connection between all these controllers to go ahead and make sure these signals are operating at the peak. So again, this is a list of the 8 signals that we have through the corridor. So what have we done trying to identify funds for the projects? And this is one of the most difficult things. How do we identify a corridor that we have well over $15 million with improvements? How do we go ahead and get the funding for those issues? So the last GEO bond, we actually had 3 of the projects on the last GEO bond project. And that included the intersection at 10th Street. Again, the intersection at 10th Street included the dual left turns that we've talked about, and just adding enough so as we went to the north, we had room for that 5th lane to go ahead and keep it going north. The next project was tying on to 10th Street and including that 5th lane all the way up to the interstate. And then the last project picked up on the interchange, the southbound, westbound to southbound ramp, and from that location through the Brahms all the way up through Vandermint, making that the 5-lane section through there. With the GEO bond not passing, what has the city done to keep on these same projects on the forefront? So they have been submitted for ACOG funding. So the 3 projects that we identified and pretty much was what's been included for ACOG. The one thing that was additional on there was the additional southbound lane from I-40 westbound to Health Center Parkway. We haven't had any luck getting any of the projects funded through ACOG in 2022. So we went ahead and added for 2023 both of those 5th lane sections. So then the question is, why didn't we go ahead and add that southbound lane from the interchange? So city staff has worked really yeoman's work with District 4 engineer, and they've identified a project that ODOT can go ahead and participate in. You've gone ahead and approved the local project agreement with ODOT on this project. And what this does is take care of a few of the projects that were identified in the 2016 traffic study. And again, for the westbound off-ramp, you can see there's now going to be a dual left turns going southbound. Because we're putting the dual left turns in, ODOT's gone ahead and agreed to add that additional southbound lane all the way to Health Center Parkway. They've also agreed to go ahead and do the improvements for the southbound Garth Brooks to add that intersection for dual Fs going back to the Oklahoma City ramp. So these improvements right here is a little over $3.2 million that staff again has worked extremely hard with ODOT. 90-10 split, so again, it's better than most grants that you see. I believe ACOG grants, you may want to correct me on this, I believe it's an 80-20 split. So you actually did much better than an ACOG split on this project. So again, your staff did a fantastic job negotiating on behalf of the city. So when we get into holiday seasons, we generally expect increase in traffic. And with increase of traffic, it really highlights if the corridor is not working well. I believe you all have seen some of the issues this past few months through here once we start looking at Thanksgiving and going on into Christmas. What happens if you have a glitch in the system? So we can go ahead and talk about some of the issues that are out there. Again, when controllers are operational, there's usually a couple different programs that they put in there. There's a day-to-day, and then they also have a timing program for anticipated increase in traffic, which is generally your holiday season. They'll have an increased schedule for that. And again, like we talked about, each of the controllers is interconnected together. And when that is done now, city has a contract with a third party, and their name Signal Tech is to go ahead and maintain the signals. So if they see flashing lights or they see some type of default that's occurring out in the corridor, the first thing that they do is go out there and look at it, see if there's some way that they can fix it. And if they think it goes beyond their capabilities, then they'll go ahead and contract with TEC. And TEC is a traffic design company that really is the one who did the initial study in the corridor, and then they were the ones who go ahead and come up with the different timing programs. So it's kind of a two-phase. It's kind of the maintenance guys will go ahead and call the engineer guys to come up and see what they can do to try to fix it and see what the problem is, try to identify what's going on. So that's what's happened out in this corridor. We've gone ahead and visited with staff trying to look at where the weak point is in that, because the worst thing that can happen is you get phone calls from everybody saying, I'm sitting here through, seems like 3 cycles, and I can't get through the signal. So from that, we've gone ahead and talked to TEC, because they were called recently trying to figure out what's going on out there. And again, it's ranged from 2 or 3 different things. One of it is faulty buttons on a pedestrian crossing. So if it feels that it's being pressed, they think that there's people trying to walk through, and it's like a 5 to 7 second delay time that they could try to get the pedestrians through when there's nobody there, but it disrupts every one of the signals. And then the other one is the optics that's used to go ahead and use for detection. And sometimes we're having some defaults on the detection equipment. So those are the reasons we're having the issues. So while we understand what the reasons are, the questions that you guys have is how do you fix it? So again, we've gone ahead and worked with staff with some ideas, and I think they're probably going to be implementing some new methods to go ahead and have a lot speedier response when we start having the defaults out there, starting to get immediate reports back on defaults that are happening in the corridor, so then they can go ahead and move forward with the improvements to the corridor. So there's other things that are out there in this corridor we went ahead and looked at also. Corridor is kind of a unique corridor because we have concrete through the extents of the interchange, and then we have asphalt on either side. And if you look at the asphalt's in really poor condition. We don't have any major potholes or anything like that, but you're seeing an awful lot of alligator cracking in it. And when we start seeing alligator cracking, that's when we start worrying about deeper failures that can occur in the pavement. The 5-lane section that we had proposed was new asphalt for the new 5th lane, and then we were going to mill and overlay the existing poor asphalt to go ahead and give life to it. Without those projects moving forward, we probably need to start talking more about the life of that asphalt surface. And then in the concrete, it's in fair condition. While we don't have any big faults in the panels, if you guys drive it, you'll see that long longitudinal crack right in the middle of the lane. So we probably need to start talking about some type of joint sealing, that we probably need to start talking about some type of program. But again, we're lucky right now because we haven't seen any big failures in those slabs. So again, that's pretty much on the pavement side. Then the last thing that we wanted to go ahead and look at was on the pavement markings. So the staff has done a good job maintaining the pavement stripings. The things that we kind of noticed were there were some areas that when we had the tapers constructed, the striping didn't go far enough to go ahead and include some striping in. And on occasion, we'll see some areas where some of the PEG crossings were showing a little bit of age, but again, the staff has done a good job going out there and painting that so it's highly visible at nighttime. Usually when you're wanting to see the best time for pavement markings, either at nighttime or when it's raining. So they seem to be doing quite well right now. So with that, if you have any more detailed questions.
Does anyone have any questions? All right, thank you so much for that presentation. It was very informative.
Thank you.
All right. We will adjourn our study session and start back up in 10 minutes at 7 o'clock for our meeting.